Hello everyone, welcome to my new tutorial. Today we are going to create this looped cell with nucleus and membrane and lots of particles around it. But the interesting part of the tutorial won't be the cell itself, but the seamless loop of the particles and the seamless loop of the displacement noise. So we are going to start to create the core, the cell nucleus, and therefore we are going to create an icosphere, and that icosphere we are going to add a displacement modifier, create select new and click on that little icon there. And we're going to select the Stucky noise displacement, and then you have to play a little bit around with the values. It doesn't have to be very big, just a little bit. Size, maybe something like that, not too heavy. Then we can go back and play with the strength. Maybe something like that. And now we have to animate that noise displacement. Therefore, we're going to create a circle. Make it big enough so that you can see it. And that will be our rotation for our noise control, and the noise control will be an empty. Now click on the empty and click in the modifier tab on objects constraint properties and add a follow path. Now our empty should follow that Bézier circle. Now you can see it's exactly placed on the circle, and now we have to move that empty around that circle. Therefore you go to frame number 1 and create a new frame on frame number 1. Then you go all the way down to frame number 251, because our animation later will be 250 frames long, but the frame 250 will be exactly the same frame as frame number 1. And because we want to have a seamless loop and no double frames, we have to insert the second frame, the end frame, on one keyframe after our last keyframe. So type again in that keyframe and type in a value of 100 and replace that keyframe. And now we have our empty running around that circle. Now click again on the icosphere. Click on the displacement modifier and select coordinates local object, and then select from the object our empty, and there it is. Our noise displacement starts to move, and let's control if it's really a seamless loop. Click on frame number 1 and frame number 250, and there's only a slight difference. That means it's going to be start all over again on frame 1 with a seamless loop. You can play with the values and the strength and the velocity of the displacement, and the empty is the control of our noise displacement animation, and I call that core displacement control, And our circle I will call core circle control. So now if you go back to the empty, click on constraints, and with that influence down here, you can control how heavy the animation of the displacement is. So now it's much more slower. If I want to speed it up, I can increase that. The cool thing about that is that you also can animate that value, so it can be slower and faster. Now we got our core. Maybe we add a subdivision surface on it, and now it's something like an organic shape that flows around in some fluid. Okay, next thing is we are going to create our membrane. Therefore, we create again an icosphere, and we have that to make a little bit bigger. Don't forget to transform all your objects. And now we can do the same thing again. Let's rename it. The first icosphere was our core or nucleus, and the second one will be our membrane. Once again, we need a circle. Make it a little bit larger so we can separate them. And let's rename it membrane circle control. We could now use the same controls for our membrane as for our core, but I think we are more flexible if we make some separate controls, so it looks maybe a little bit more realistic, and we are free to let the membrane flow a little bit faster or slower than the core. So we need an empty. Empty. Let's rename it membrane displacement control. And again, we select our membrane circle. No, we select our membrane displacement control, add an object constraint, follow path, and we select our membrane circle control. Same procedure as last year. No, same procedure as we did before for the core control. Add a keyframe at frame number 1. Keyframe at 1 frame after your loop. Insert keyframe, and no, sorry, again, type in 100 for 100% and replace that keyframe, and now we have some 2 perfect loops of our empties. Now click on the membrane, and we add there 2 and displacement. Click on new on that little icon here, and you can play with all these noise textures. Best for me, I think, works noise, Stucky, or Voronoi. I decide to take Stucky. Size a little bit bigger. The animation is not too much. And go back to the strength. That should be enough. And again, under coordinates, choose object, and now we choose our membrane displacement control. So there it is. That's our membrane. Again, we add a subdivision surface and set this to smooth. Now we have a membrane and a core, and I think now it's time to add some materials so that we can see something. There it is. They are moving separately. So I've already prepared some materials, nothing fancy. For the core, I've prepared something like that. Let me add a light that we can see something. Area light. Or maybe we work first at the membrane. I prepared where it is, membrane shader. Nothing fancy. It's just a transmission class shader. And I've added something like a Fresnel node, so the edges should be not 100% translucent, and I give it a little bit of emission. So that worked for me, but you can add, of course, the material whatever you want. To get a better view on it, I recommend to add a frame in the background. Rotate it. Something like that maybe. Light a little bit higher to make it more interesting to the side. Oops. And we want to have it much brighter. Maybe 200. I realize we have no camera yet. Where is our camera? There it is. And there we have our membrane with nucleus. I realized that our nucleus is a little bit too big. Maybe something like that. Let's check if the animation still works. Now I think the nucleus animation is a little bit too big. We can change that by changing the strength. And I think we can put the size a little bit down. So maybe something like that. Yes. And I think the membrane is moving a little bit too fast. We can change that in the membrane displacement control by changing the influence. And I think we still have not enough displacement on the membrane. So click on the membrane. And we are going to add a little bit more deformation. So maybe something like that. You can play with it, change it to the values you like best. It's now not exactly the same as I showed you in the intro movie, but it's that only depends on some slight change of the values here. So you get the same result as in the intro, and I will put a download link in the description where you can download the exact Blender file that you saw in the intro. So now we have a loop on the displacement, and now we are going to create some looped particles. Therefore, we need again an empty an icosphere, and this time we'll make it much bigger because that will be our container for our particles. Same procedure, we need a circle. Make it bigger so that we can see something. Again, we need an empty. First rename it particle control, and our circle we will name particle circle control, and the icosphere we will rename particle container. Now again we need our empty particle control, add an object constraint, follow path, and we will take our particle circle control. Frame number 1, insert keyframe. Frame number 251, we set it to 100% and insert a keyframe, and it moves perfectly. Now same thing for our particle container. We also add some displacement, new, and sticky noise. It has to be much bigger because the animation should not be too heavy, because the particles will be very fast otherwise. Go back there and go down with the strength a little bit. So now we choose our particle container, and as a reference object we choose particle control. That's our empty. As we can see now, it's moving very fast, so we go into our particle control and reduce the strength. It's still too much. Maybe we should reduce the strength a little bit. Maybe 0.2. And I think that's enough. So next thing is we are going to add some particles to it. So first let's create our particle, something simple. Maybe we can take again an icosphere, scale it a little bit down. We can change the size later, transform it, click on our container, and now we add a particle system. We change it to hair, click on advanced, and first of all we go to the render tab and change path to object, and we select our icosphere that we first have to rename it to particle. Now it's a particle. We want a particle, and we change it here from insert object. We collect our particle, and now we have a lot of particles on the outside of our container. To change that, we click on source and we change faces from volume. Now we have all the particles inside of our container, and as you can see they are all floating in a very nice fluent way. We can now set show emitter, we set it to off, and under viewport display we set it to off. So there are two show emitter buttons. First one is under render and the second one is under viewport display. And now we have already a smooth animation. Maybe we can play a little bit with the size of our particles and of course with the random scaleness. And all you have to do now is change the values to the values you like the best. Add some materials to the particles and maybe to the background. The light is way too bright for the background wall, I think. Maybe something like that. We can add another material to the wall. Maybe something black. Add again a little bit more light. And now we are really close to the scene I showed you at the beginning. Maybe you can give the particles some glow or some other material you like, and change the base color or the subsurface values from your core. In that case, I think it's a little bit too small. I can see no subsurface scattering. That looks better to me. And there it is, our looped cell with membrane and particles.